Okay, looks like we're ready to go. Thanks everybody so much for joining us today. I'd like to welcome you to our discussion, dialogue, conversation with Grzegorz Kwiatkowski. We've entitled this talk Confronting Hate. And Grzegorz is a poet and a musician, the lead singer for the band Trupa Trupa, who many of you might know, and we're really looking forward to a discussion with him today. I want to begin, however, by acknowledging that Western University and City Lights Bookshop, the co-hosts of this event, are situated on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Lenape-Wuk, Haudenosaunee, and Chinookan nations. And these territories are connected to three pre-Confederation treaties. The London Township Treaty of 1796, the Sombra Treaty of 1796, and the Longwoods Treaty of 1822, as well as to the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. I mentioned that this event is co-hosted by the Faculty of Information and Media Studies at Western University and City Lights Bookstore in downtown London. One of the owners, the new owners, brand new owners of City Lights Bookstore is here with us today, Dan Harvey, and I just wanted to invite him to say a couple of introductory words.
Hello, everyone. As Mandy mentioned, my name is Dan. I am the new owner of City Lights Bookshop in downtown London, Ontario. The Faculty of Information and Media Studies is near and dear to my heart. I'm a fellow graduate of many years ago, and I am extremely pleased and happy to be part of this event as a co-host. And I hope that this might lead to future events down the road between our two communities and our two organizations to spread education and provide more information for a number of individuals on topics like this, as well as many others. So thanks again for being with us today. And thanks again for Mandy and Western and FIMS for putting this together. And we're live on Facebook right now. So say hello to the world, everyone.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dan. And yes, this is our inaugural event, the first of what we hope will be many collaborations between FIMS and the bookstore. So it's really exciting. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Grzegorz Kwiatkowski. He is a poet, as I mentioned earlier, and lead singer of the post-punk and art rock band Trupa Trupa. His poems and songs are very provocative, sometimes controversial, and they explore themes such as the history of the Jewish Holocaust, Polish anti-Semitism, and the ascendancy of right-wing nationalism and populism in Poland and Europe and really the world. Rolling Stone recently published an article in which they reflect on Trupa Trupa's latest newly released single called Uniforms, and we're going to hopefully have a chance to watch that video a little later on in the program. They referred to the song as a clarion call for humanism in a hateful world. And in 2019, The Guardian said of Trupa Trupa, the Gdansk quartet rail against right-wing hate speech. So this is I think a really interesting point for us to reflect on today, the role of art in resistance to hate. And we'll get into some of those questions a little bit later. I'm going to invite Grzegorz to say a few opening words in a moment, but I did want to say for those of you joining us today on the Zoom call and also on the live stream on Facebook or Instagram, we are going to explore some really difficult topics in the discussion today, including genocide and mass violence, rape, and hate. And these are not easy topics, but I believe as a professor that it's really important for us to discuss them openly if we are going to combat hatred in our communities and in our world. So Grzegorz is, I think, joining us from Gdansk, his home on the Baltic Sea, which was the birthplace of the Solidarity movement in the 1980s. He formed Trupa Trupa in 2009, and they have since released, I believe, 6 albums, 2 EPs, and multiple singles. And in 2021, just a few months ago, Grzegorz published a chapbook in English called Crops, which includes a collection of poems that focus primarily on the history of the Holocaust in Poland, Polish complicity in the murder of Jewish neighbors, and right-wing responses to these hateful acts. So Grzegorz, welcome. And I'm wondering if you could just start by providing us with an overview of your artistic practice, the meaning and context of your work, and maybe a little bit about what motivates you.
Hello, it's nice to meet you, and I'm super happy to be here with you. And thank you for invitation, dear Amanda, and thank you for invitation, dear Daniel. Yeah, I'm here for the same reason. I'm from time to time somewhere in the Zoom mode all over the world, and I think that the point is, of course, hatred, and the point is the existence of evil, and the point is that, in my opinion, this evil issue is our individual issue mainly, and that's the point maybe of my artistic path, that I'm writing and I'm singing about evil, about evil in the world, about hatred, about genocide, and about atrocities. But the point is that I'm doing it because my family has got, let's say, dark roots. So yeah, I was born and I'm living in the city of Gdansk. Amanda mentioned that this is the city where the Solidarity movement was established, but this is also the city where the Second World War began. And 30 miles from Gdansk, there is a concentration camp, Stutthof, and my grandfather and his sister were prisoners of this concentration camp. And when I was a child, I came with my grandfather to this museum of a concentration camp, and it was first time he was there after the war. And suddenly I saw my grandfather, who was suddenly in the state of trauma. So he was trying to reconstruct, he was saying something, shouting something. So and for me, it was a shock for a child. And it was in some way very tragic beginning for me, tragic beginning of this tragic knowledge and I had so many questions, simple and tragic questions, kind of, why people are killing each other, why there are concentration camps, etc., etc. And I got the same questions till now, and I'm shocked about evil. That's the point. Maybe I'm kind of over fragile person, but in some way I can't accept the humiliation and violence and hatred. I just can't accept it, and I'm in some way also afraid of it. So my family had these dark events in the past, and I was my grandfather. After all, he was a broken person. He was a person who lived more or less in a state of trauma after the war. My father was not so broken person, but he's still alive. But he was not so, let's say, open-hearted father, because his father had this dark experience, and I'm the third generation who is trying to deal with that, and who's trying to speak about that and to tell about that. So I was writing and I was singing for most of the time for myself. I didn't have any idea that I will share it with someone. It was my research. It was my therapeutic session. But anyway, I was always close to human rights in the way. For many years in the city of Gdansk, I was a coordinator of Amnesty International in Gdansk. my mother is also a teacher in special needs school in Gdansk. So for me, fragility and helping to others was kind of an obvious way. But the point is that many years ago, I read a book of an American poet, Edgar Lee Masters, and his Spoon River anthology. And this book in some way opened everything for me. Edgar Lee Masters gave me a key, a kind of a matrix to deal with genocide, Polish landscape in my poetry. So I started to write poem after poem, and in the way of a kind of a epitaph way. And this poetry is full of testimonies of many voices, because this is a polyphonic. It's got a polyphonic structure. I also try to make something on music field, on Trupa Trupa field. So of course, in Trupa Trupa, we've got democratic system and structure. We love this kind of events like Fugazi from DC. So we don't have a leader, we don't have one frontman, but my input is this historic memory input. So I'm trying also to use this platform to talk about hate speech and to talk about morality and ethics. So I'm doing it for it. I'm doing it for many years, really. But because of pandemia, I think that and because of these university lectures, I think that I'm believing in this, in sense of this way, in bigger way. I always thought about myself as a kind of a Don Quixote, that that I'm doing idealistic thing, and it doesn't matter if I've got any feedback or not. I just think I just need to do what I feel. But after 1 year of meetings like this meeting, I really think that it's got a sense. It's got a sense to spread this anti-hate message through the art.
That's a great overview of your history, your motivations. Really amazing, and I think we can see this in Crops, in your chapbook. Your poems are really stark, very minimalist, often incredibly brutal and violent. I see the references to the testimonies and the juxtaposition, I think, of violent acts and monstrosity on the one hand, and very ordinary people in perpetrator positions on the other.
But you said about you said that it's brutal and very violent, and I would say that this is one of my problems in the way that, because how to speak about the facts from the past and about the truth, but without spreading these violent hatred emotions. And the point is that because we are now in some way in Canada, that because I said about Edgar Lee Masters, but my second hero and the biggest hero in my life is Glenn Gould, because my poetry is made in a totally anti-melodramatic way, and in some way anti-violent way, and it's as cold as it can be. And I learned it from Glenn Gould, because his neutral mathematical way of playing was for me energetic, full of big emotions past. So because of him, I think that I can write about these very, very brutal acts, not in a very brutal way, because I don't want to give any fuel to this hatred machinery. And I learned it from Gould, right?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Let's read some of your poetry. So maybe I can begin. You invited me to read Burning, which is one of your longer poems. I'll try to do it justice. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that poem, and then I'll ask you to read a few more shorter poems from the collection. So this is Burning from Crops. Where are Isaac, Moshe, Vefa? They are all asleep here beneath this soil. Where are Raquela, Stefan, Alexander. They are all asleep beneath this soil. In Stavisky, in Tekochin, in Rajivo, in Sheshev, in Drohichin, in Yedvabna. He had butchered 18 Jews, he told me, in my apartment as he built in my stove. And the sun still shines upon his house and the generations of his family. You raped a Jewess behind the mill and you slashed her throat. In the village, he is greatly respected, despite being a bachelor, despite being decrepit. And to this day, a sign hangs on his door, Jews, gypsies, and devils not welcome. He hit a child with an iron rod, brains splattering on his clothes, and made its mother clean up the mess. He worked in the fields, toiled late into the night. He was kind to his dying mother. Let us not judge him in his hour of need. They began beating her, turning her white body black. There was so much chaos in those days. Such everyday misdemeanors and transgressions might now seem something special. O Lord, thou pluckest us from their hands, burning, burning in the barn, burning. So reflections on, well, it's always hard to ask you to talk about your own work, right?
Maybe your students.
Any thoughts from the group, reactions? You had an opportunity to read these poems in advance. Anyone want to jump in with your responses?
Anyway, for me.
Yeah, quiet. Go ahead. Maybe they'll jump in after.
Yeah. I just as an opportunity, but yeah, for me this is a difficult poem. Even if I know the poem and I wrote the poem, and when you read it, for me this is a difficult thing to listen to. It's pure hardcore in the way. But the point is that this poem begins with the beginning of this poem is exactly the same, almost exactly, or analogical to the beginning of Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River anthology, and the end of this poem is analogical to Wasteland of T.S. Eliot. So I just wanted to say that we always, I think that the pure brutality and it's if we'll show pure brutality and pure hardcore and violence, it doesn't change anything in some way. We have to put it in a form which will be something wider and open for some optimistic and good responses. I mean, that I really believe that by facing this dark truth, we cannot be more depressed, but we can experience kind of a emotion of lack of light. You know what I mean? That we need a light. That it's too dark. We need a light right now. So this is my reaction on dark art. That when I'm reading, for example, to books of Thomas Bernhard, or when I'm watching Shoah by Claude Lanzmann, I think I need light. I need fresh moral light. And always when I hit this wall of violence and of dark history, I just want to be a better person. That's the point. But these are my reactions. People have got different reactions, I'm sure.
Any other comments on the poem? Just an opportunity to open it back up.
I actually could jump in and just say just one brief thing, if that's okay. The one spot that jumped out most specifically for me was when you mentioned it was the man who was reinstalling your stove, or it was this man who was providing you a rather banal service of fixing your appliance, and him living a life after various events happening. And this sort of brings back memories of the Ordinary Men, which is the text that highlights how various people were doing various things, but inevitably they were in some ways just ordinary men. Obviously, there's a lot of to break down with that, but I think that's the one part in it that stood out for me, is just how who these people performing certain tasks inevitably were just humans. But like, what do they do after that these things happen? Do they hide forever, or do they go back to fixing stoves?
Yeah. This is kind of a banality of evil, but I think that the point is that this is also art of lying. That's the point. That I think that more strong thing is not a banality of evil, but that evil is almost every time made from lying, of a lying process. That people are lying to themselves, and it's not that they can't see that someone is suffering. I think that people really used to lie, and I think that the most risky, by the way, process of the genocide process, in the way, is the process of lying and untruth situations. So I think that all characters in these poems, they knew that they were wrong in some way, but they are pretending everything is cool, but it's not. If I can, so I will read a few short poems, right? Crops. Our real work is farm work, not killing. Although I admit the massacres in the swamps have the rhythm of our seasonal labor, and when the rains were heavy, we did not go out for crops. Ranger dance. During the war, we laid out bodies like wood, but after the war, we laid out wood in the forest like bodies freshly felled. Walter Stier. My father, a decent office worker in the railways, never took part in any of the shootings. He was just doing his job, organizing transports eastward and westward, north and south, back and forth. Karl-Heinz M. I was 14 years old. I was sterilized because I couldn't tell the difference between a brook and a stream, between steps and stairs. Szymon Srebrnik. I didn't believe I would return to Poland ever again, to Chełmno, and that I would stand where they killed me. No, no, no. Ernst Junger. War has let me down. Modern war has not met my expectations. It didn't live up to its literary ideal. For example, there were no horses. Thank you.
Thank you, Grzegorz. When I'm reading your poetry, drawing some comparisons, you mentioned some of your poetic inspirations. I find myself drawing some comparisons to testimonies, particularly, the references to Shoah. So you read one poem about Simon Srebrnik and his return to Chełmno. And so certainly, it for me reminds me of those many times I watched that 9.5-hour documentary, right, with different groups of students. I think probably I've seen it in its entirety, maybe 15 times, maybe 20. But I also thought of Charlotte Delvaux, who was a French political prisoner. She published a prose poem, testimony of her time at Auschwitz, called "None of Us Will Return." And I wanted to read a brief passage from her testimony, and maybe get some reflections from you as well. All day, all night, every day, every night, the chimneys smoke, fed by this fuel sent from every part of Europe. Standing at the mouth of the crematoria, men sift through ashes to find gold melted from gold teeth. All those Jews have mouths full of gold, and since there are so many of them, it adds up to tons and tons. In the spring, men and women sprinkle ashes on drained marshland plowed for the first time. They fertilize the soil with human phosphate. From bags tied around their bellies, they draw human bone meal, which they sow upon the furrows. By the end of the day, their faces are covered with white dust blown back up by the wind. Sweat trickling down over the white powder traces their wrinkles. They need not fear running short of fertilizer, since train after train gets here every day and every night, every hour of every day and every night. This is the largest station in the world for arrivals and departures. So just a segment from a longer reflection on what she observed as a political prisoner in Auschwitz. And I'm wondering, thinking about your poetry, thinking about Delbo's poetic prose poem Testimony, what does music and poetry offer us in terms, in particular, of being able to represent something that is in some ways unrepresentable?
I agree that it's in some way unrepresentable, but I think we can try. And I don't remember now the English title of the book by Didi Iberman, The Images Above All, right? It's so instead of it, images, I think it was something like that. But the point of Didi Iberman was, the book of Didi Iberman, the French philosopher, was that, we are trying to be as possible as we can to this tragic past. And of course, in some way, or maybe in a big way, we are failing. But this process of trying to remember and trying to spreading this tragic information about the past is crucial here. And anyway, on the other hand, I can say that I believe in genetic memory, and I think it's proven thing, genetic memory. And so, it's for example, I can give you an example. A few months ago, I discovered that my grandfather was. I discovered kind of papers from concentration camp. I mean that his memories from the concentration camp. And so I read it a few months ago, and it was a shocking thing for me because I didn't speak with him a lot because he wasn't the person who was open for conversation. But after all, I noticed that I am writing in a very similar way that he was writing, for example, and he was writing it kind of 30 years ago or 40 years ago in a very maybe even grotesque way, kind of a, anti-aesthetic way, in some way anti-humanitarian way, just to, we can just keep trying, and I think that that especially on this field, because in the past I told you at the beginning that the feedback wasn't so important for me, that I was just digging in the ground. But I think that now the feedback is really important for me in the way that I really believe in the power of art, and I really believe in power of Shoah by Claude Lanzmann. I really believe, I even believe in power of Schindler's List by Spielberg. I know that there are a lot of discussion about, is it all right or not, or is it too kitschy, or is it too flat, or etc. But let's see this thing in educational way. That there are more and more people in the world that thinks that Holocaust didn't happen. That the dynamic is horrible. That more people claim that there was no Holocaust. So and a lot of people will not read the poetry, of course. So I think that, for example, a Hollywood movie about Holocaust is not the worst thing that could happen with a memory about Holocaust. Of course, I stand rather on Claude Lanzmann's side when I think about methodology, but anyway, I think that we should just try to do whatever we can in most pacifistic and peaceful way to spread this anti-hate message, because the message about the past is in some way an anti-hate message. And I also think that the past is not the past. That's another point, in the way that now for 2 weeks or 3 we are observing the negotiation between Russia, Ukraine, and USA, and this is a shocking thing in the way that I think that we're used to it. But this is so shocking that for few weeks people are talking openly about if they will attack Ukraine or not. This is beyond everything I could imagine in 2022. And for example, reaction, people, there are a lot of criticism against USA and diplomacy of USA, but all right, and I agree with that, but let's see on reactions of Europe and France and Germany on Vladimir Putin and Russia. It's so disappointing. You know what I mean? It's so disappointing that it's not 1939, and I'm not a right-wing person to attack German forces. But quite opposite. I'm a left-wing person, if I have to say on which side I am. But big country would like to attack another country and kill a lot of people, and diplomacy of Germany says, chill out, everything will be fine. So the history is not a history. That's the point. That history is happening right now, today, and Ukraine and Russia is just an example. And so I think there are a lot of benefits of digging in the ground of tragic history for all of us. And I think one of the biggest benefits for me is that I am the potential perpetrator. That the evil is also can be also in me. That it's not outside. It's not in Russia. It's not Vladimir Putin. But I can be a bad person. I can be a bad person as a father. I can be a bad person as a husband. I can be a bad person as a worker. I can be a bad person as a mate in the band. There are a lot of platforms for evil. And I think that facing these tragedies, big tragedies, for me, it's like a moral wake-up situation. In a way, you wake up, wake up for the world and wake up for yourself, and then you can try to protest. And I think that even this kind of event is in some way not only educational event, but it's a protest event. And we are in some way protesting against the forces of evil. Maybe it's naive, but I don't think it's naive. I think this is how it is. Sorry for this monologue, because sometimes as you can see, it's kind of a so it's.
You already anticipated one of my questions, which is about this crisis that we're seeing. But I see that Olivia has a question, and also Ben. So Olivia, or a comment maybe.
Yeah, so I have a comment and then also a question. Just to kind of answer what poetry really offers us. I kind of found that before reading your poems and everything, the Holocaust, when I would hear facts and stuff about it, it was very historical to me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so gruesome, but it's not really present anymore, kind of. But really hearing those poems, I feel like I can relate more now, and I understand what the individual people went through and how their actual feelings were, and it just makes it all that more real to me. So that's why I think poetry and music and stuff like that is so important, because it really helps us conceptualize what actually happened, and that it still matters to this day for sure. And then another question I had, so as you wrote these poems, some of them are from people who did not great things, kind of for example, the transportation officer. I know you did one poem from his point of view. How do you not feel super angry, or do you feel super angry when you're writing from their perspective, and kind of how do you cope with that? Because I just feel kind of angry from reading that someone would do something so gruesome. So I just was kind of wondering how you dealt with those feelings while writing them.
I think it's a great question. The way I also feel angry. That's the point. That I also feel angry, and I think he wouldn't be happy that he is one of my characters in some way, and that he's inside of this book in some way. And it's not about revenge. It's not about fighting with someone, but I think it's about facts and about that you know, his figure, his character is just a proof of the Holocaust, and I think that, I know what you mean, in the way that, as I told earlier about Glenn Gould, that I'm trying to be as cold as I can when I write and when I but I just try, but I'm also angry, but I really try not to be angry, because, you know, it's always an easy way to, from anger to hate, etc. You know what I mean? That I'm trying to be, in some way, I'm trying not to be a judge. Maybe, of course, I'm judging all the time, and every one of us is judging all the time. But I don't like easy black and white moralization stuff. You know what I mean? But anyway, you are right. I'm also angry when I'm writing it down or I'm reading it. Yeah, but I think that this is my way of you know, because I'm trying to picture kind of a genocide landscape. So I need this kind of a voice. You know, if there would be voices only of victims without this voice of perpetrators, I think it wouldn't be a real landscape. You know, and I think perpetrators should be visible. You know, there and yeah, because they are perpetrators, of course.
True.
You have perpetrators and victims' perspectives. Do you think also there is the perspective of the bystander in your work, or are we bystanders when we read the poems?
It's hard. I don't know. Sometimes maybe sometimes someone is observing, not really, but it's hard to be non-guilty observer. You know what I mean? You're always on one side or another. It's hard to be on no one side. So I would like to maybe I think that I am observer. You know, I am as an author observer. But these voices are. But on the other hand, there is also a voice, and I read this poem of Ernst Junger, and Ernst Junger, who is on one hand great writer, but his ethical side is very, very controversial. So I put, for example, the voice of Ernst Junger here, also to show, in some way, lack of fragility. You know what I mean? Lack of fragility on this horror. You know, that he's just feels sorry that there were no horses on the war, and it wasn't so cool in old school way. But yeah, but yeah, I don't know if I gave you an answer. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great answer. Ben, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, initially it was just going to be a question about one of the poems, but talking about the bystander thing, it reminded me of a video I saw, I think it was a year or two ago, of Arnold Schwarzenegger talking about his father's experience and his experience growing up in post-World War II Austria. And he was saying that there was a really big problem with like alcoholism. Like men would come home and they would just drink their sorrows away because there was this like huge feeling of guilt for the involvement. And I feel like maybe even if you weren't involved, you still felt responsible in a way. And that just reminded me of that video. It was a very interesting video. If you are interested, probably just Google that and find it. But my question was, you had the one poem which was about the difference between a brook and a stream and steps and stairs. What's the meaning behind that exactly?
This is a poem about eugenic project, and about, because the most of these poems I wrote in the city of Vienna in Austria. So you mentioned Austria. I was a city writer of Vienna, and I was focusing on Am Spiegelgrund clinic. It was a child clinic, and during the Second World War they killed thousands of children, and they took their brains to laboratory. So anyway, there was a T4 project, and it was kind of a test. So this poem is a real test. These are the exact words of this eugenic test, and if you pass it, you know, everything was in the result of this test. Of course, it's one big absurd, but this is the truth from the past. And And what you said about Arnold Schwarzenegger, yeah, maybe they had the guilt inside of them. I don't know. I was for many years in Austria in Graz, in Vienna, and I had a lot of scholarship there. And I think this is the dark place, very dark place still. I even would say it's more darker than Poland, and I think they still feel as victims of Hitler, because now after the Second World War, they claim that they were victim of a Hitler, that Austria was annexed by Germany, so they were victims, but it's rather not true. And most of SS officers were Austrian actually. And for example, of course, I will say incognito, but my friend from Austria, she asked me a few questions about some stuff from the past, and I asked her a few questions about her family. So she said, my father was during the Second World War, my father was in Russia and in Ukraine, but I think I've got a really good intuition. So I asked her, did your father was the member of Einsatzgruppe? And he was. And so she said, you're the first person who asked me about it, but after the war. But if you are asking me, I can say he was an Einsatzgruppen officer. But she wasn't, she didn't feel guilty about that. Not at all. In the way that she said, yeah, he was. So what? That's all. You know what I mean? So I think that it's rather that I think that these people are living in a state of lying, but I don't know if this state of lying, permanent lying, is a feeling of guilty. You know what I mean? That I don't know if they are feeling bad with this process of lying, but I don't know. I really don't know if it.
Okay.
I don't know.
Interesting.
If I gave you an answer.
Carly has a question or comment.
Hi, I'll turn my camera on so you can see me. Okay, so I had a comment and kind of a question as well. So I just wanted to add that I really respect the struggle you must go through in your work of kind of walking a tightrope, maybe of wanting to bring attention to hateful acts so that they're not recreated and perpetrated again, but also not wanting to give the perpetrators any more attention than they deserve. Like, kind of correct me if I'm wrong. I just really appreciated the way you spoke about that a little bit earlier. And then I just wanted to ask, I know that like news and journalism is different from your creative work in some aspects, but I wanted to ask if there's anything you wish you saw more in the media or in journalism about how hate is represented or the attention it receives.
It's a hard question, but generally speaking, I think that the media and the Facebook platforms and social media platforms are in 2022 the biggest hatred machinery that ever existed. So it's hard to imagine that it would change in a big way, because it's worse and worse. I really don't know. I think that the most problem, and it's also my problem, it's not the problem of the world, but I'm so conscious that, for example, this Russia and Ukraine's case, that we used to something and it's all right. You know what I mean? The problem is that we used to some state of violence, for example, and we don't protest because it's normal. For example, hunger in Africa. There is the issue of hunger in Africa was in media for years. So what? You know what I mean? So we know that people are dying in Africa. So what? Nothing. We used to this tragic knowledge. So I don't know. I don't know what to say in the way. I think we should protest. From we should be sincere as we can, and we should protest. But I don't know. I'm doing it. I'm doing what I can. But I can't say, to someone, you should do this and that in a better way. I'm not a media specialist. For sure, media are spreading the hate speech in a super fast way, and even in coronavirus crisis. Of course, people should be vaccinated, and I'm on the side of medicine and knowledge, but I really can see the dynamic of media when they say, today we had 10,000 cases, you know what I mean? And I can see that they are excited about dark dynamic of, for example, state of health of people in Great Britain or in Poland. Anyway, but this process is worse and worse every day. So on the other hand, there are big medias, for example, because Amanda mentioned at the beginning about Rolling Stone article. So one day you are reading in Rolling Stone about anti-hate little chapbook, and it's kind of amazing that someone is taking care about spreading this anti-hate message, and he said, wow, so it's not so black and white. So maybe that's the point, that I hope it should be more divertised and not so black and white. I don't know.
I'm going to jump in. I do want to, before we break, have an opportunity to look at the uniforms video that's featured in the Rolling Stone article. But I wanted to ask a question about the current context in Poland. It seems to me that while there has always been a kind of polarized response to the Holocaust in Poland, a lot of Soviet-informed denial in the early years after the war that was present at sites of memory and former death camps and concentration camps, for example. But it seems to be the case that there are many people of your generation, and I guess slightly older, people in their late 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, who really are, and these are non-Jewish Poles, who see themselves in some way, or who act in the sense of a proxy as keepers of Jewish memory in Poland. So there is the Gliwice Jewish Museum in Krakow, which documents the traces of Jewish memory across that region of Poland. There is the Auschwitz Jewish Center, currently under attack, I understand. They've been listed on a list of negative influences on young people in Poland. I've been sort of trying to follow this.
It's pure absurd, right?
Like homophobic, anti, tolerance education stuff, right, coming from the right wing. And then you have, the Grodzka Gate NN Theater in Lublin, of course, doing incredible memory work. Activists in Travniki and other places who are attending to Jewish cemeteries and, restoring them and recovering stolen headstones and so forth. So, there are in Łódź as well that, there are Polish people who are so attentive, beyond attentive. They dedicated their lives to keeping these traces of Jewish memory alive, to restoring them, caring for the cemeteries and so forth. On the other hand, there is a tremendously strong right-wing movement reflected in the current government that is, homophobic and anti-immigrant, and if not denying the history of the Holocaust, at the very least diminishing the history, and particularly the role of Poles as collaborators and sometimes perpetrators in anti-Semitic violence. So I'm wondering if you can reflect a little bit on that polarization. What is the current scene and situation in Poland, and what role does your artistic practice play in that dialogue?
I think that you were very lucky to meet the really heroes from Poland, for example, from Jewish Galicia Museum, and you're right that there are people who are taking care in a big way, but we are talking really about maybe 100 of people in the whole country who's got 40 millions of people. So it's not enough number to taking care in a big way. But still, they are big heroes. But the problem is that Poland is a really, it's a really devastated country, and this is very important thing. This is the really devastated country with the First World War, Second World War, a lot of decades in the communism regime, a lot of traumas, a lot of, we are really dark, post-traumatic, full of hatred society. And I think that the problem is that I think that the most of Poland, for example, is still anti-Semitic, not only right-wing. I think that many people on the left wing are homophobic and anti-Semitic. They just don't say about it loudly. I think that for example, I will give you. We've got 2022, and a few years ago, I found out that the family of my wife is a Jewish family, and her grandmother was hiding in the forest during the Second World War, in the forest near the city of Rzeszów. Until now, they still claim it's not true. Sometimes they say it was true, sometimes not, but they are afraid. The mood in the area is that they are less or more afraid. They said, all right, we were hiding in the forest, but what does it mean? Is it a proof? You know what I mean? And I said, of course, it's up to you. It's your memory. I'm not a person who will teach you about your past, but I can see that they are afraid. So the problem is that it's really a dark country, not only because of right-wing government right now. 10 years ago, it was also a dark country. Of course, changes are harder to make under this right-wing government. You're right. But another example, a few years ago, me and my friend from Trupa Trupa band, we discovered almost 500,000 pairs of shoes of the victims of concentration camps from all concentration camps in Europe, and the Stutthof concentration camp, when we found it, was a kind of a reparation center for all concentration camps. So we found almost 500,000 pairs of shoes, and no one wanted to help us. You know what I mean? That I wrote to scholars, the genocide scholars, to Holocaust scholars, I wrote to kind of 200 people, and no one wanted to help us. And after 1 year after, the Guardian was the first media who helped us, outside of Poland. So, and I think the problem is also that we used to this dark atmosphere in Poland. You know what I mean? That in Poland it's not so dark for us because it's normal stuff. So. And for example, when I was trying to find a help in this shoes case, it was kind of so what? Even my friends told me, no, you're all right. These are these shoes, and so what? So what do you want to do with them? And I said, we have to secure them. These belong to victims of genocide. And they said, but how much money, we will spend for conservation of this big amount of shoes? There was no conversation about morality, about ethics. So I think that the Poland is still very dark place. On the other hand, I think that the Europe is still a very dark place, and this right-wing vibe is spreading, in the whole of Europe. A few years ago, we had Donald Trump as a president of the United States. That this evil is really still inside of us. This is not a matter of the past. And this is not only a matter of right-wing movements. That's what I wanted to say. That this is a matter of humanity and our own idea about humanity. And I think so. I think there are a lot of things to do, especially on this Polish field, right?
Grzegorz, what happened to the shoes?
So for a few years, I was fighting in a pacifistic way, but fighting with officials of this museum. So now I am kind of a persona non grata for them. Even it was a concentration camp of my grandfather, so it hurts me in some way. But anyway, so I was fighting because I've got this kind of character that I don't give up. And after a few years, they cleaned this area near the museum. They cleaned it from these shoes. So I asked them, where are the shoes? And they said to me, we buried them on the territory of museum. And I said, what? And they buried them. They hidden them. So they are invisible. The mountains of memory, they took it and they under the ground. So I think it's like a metaphor of a memory. So it's very tragic, but I'm not giving up. I will find a way to make something with it still. I don't know what way, but I will find some solution. Yeah. So but there are a lot of this kind of cases in Poland, and yeah. But because I have to say one more thing, because now I'm saying about pessimistic visions, but the point is that I'm really not giving up, and I think that there is a light in the tunnel, and that we shouldn't give up, and we shouldn't be pessimistic, but we should be optimistic. And if we are believing that our acts will change the world, then they will change the world. I think it's so easy, more or less, of course. Maybe it will change the world a bit, maybe, but they will do it. But we can't give up, in pessimistic, nihilistic state of mind.
So maybe we're getting close to time here. Excuse me, we're getting close to time here, but I'm wondering if you have a few extra minutes for us, we could take a look at the uniforms single video and just talk a little bit about the role of music and the meaning of this song.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. Give me a wave if the sound doesn't sound good, but I think I've adjusted the settings, so this should play quite smoothly through Zoom. So let's just take an opportunity to listen to this song. Okay, so you want to talk a little bit about the single, and I know that Rolling Stone interprets it as a response to maybe to historic hate, to contemporary hate, and they mentioned in the article this really subtle but important transition in the lyrics, which of course are quite repetitive, from "I want to eat all my uniforms" to "I want to be all my uniforms." Can you talk a little bit about the song?
Yeah, I think that for me, this interpretation was a new one, but when I read it, I said, yeah, that's the point. So, and that's only my in some way sponge ability, in a way that I'm really hearing of the others, and I'm hearing of other voices, and I'm analyzing others' perspectives, and it's easy for me to change perspective if I think it's a right perspective and more open and more creative and in some way more pacifistic. So yeah, I agree with it. But anyway, this is kind of an optimistic light song, and the whole album is rather a dark album. And But anyway, as I said at the beginning, I really believe that the dark art has got big sense in the way that facing or experiencing dark art leads us to the light. I really, the dark art which I experience as a reader or listener always lead me to some optimism and light. So I think that I hope that part of the Trupa Trupa has got also this ability of some sunshine vibes, giving sunshine vibes for a listener. I don't know, but on the other hand, we are super open for many interpretations. And as I said at the beginning, we are a democratic band with a democratic structure. So it's not a band of Grzegorz Kwiatkowski in the way that I'm Grzegorz Kwiatkowski, this is Trupa Trupa, and we're singing about hatred, for example. That it would be too easy. As far as I understand, my friends from the band are not so far from me in the about thinking of the world, but they are not me. You know what I mean? They are just not so activist kind, and so anyway, my thinking of Trupa Trupa was also connected to big tragedy in the way, and I think this is very important in my history, and I didn't say about it earlier because 3 years ago, the president of Gdansk, Paweł Adamowicz, was murdered. He was assassinated on the charity event, and we as a band knew the president, and it was a big shock for us. And a few weeks later, we went on South by Southwest Festival to Austin, Texas, in USA. And I dedicated this, and the point is that this murder was, in my opinion, effect of anti-hate speech. The national TV was spreading anti-hate speech around the President Adamowicz, and I think that this person who killed him was influenced by these media attacks. So few weeks after that, we went to Texas, and I dedicated our concert to memory of Paweł Adamowicz, and I didn't consult it with a band. I just did it from my heart in the way that I didn't plan it. I just thought, this is the moment, this is the place, I have to do it. And I did that. And for me, it was a big relief. It was first time I used Trupa Trupa as a platform, as an anti-hate speech platform. And after that, I asked my friends, are you angry on me? And they said, no, it's all right. It's okay. It's all good. So from this moment, I started to use the art of the band in a more conscious way about protesting and yeah.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we're pretty much out of time. I don't know if there's any last questions from the group. Well, we have the opportunity. Yeah, Madeline.
Hello, thank you so much for speaking with us and sharing your art. I had a question about your band and the songwriting process that you go through. Since your band is so unique that it explores histories and the darker side of the human condition, I'm just curious to hear about what the songwriting process looks like and how that might be different from like a different kind of band, and how you use this process to create such powerful songs.
Thank you for your opinion, and it's really, it's really nice that you think about us in this way. But I think the point is that the point is democratic structure, and the point is that we are from Gdansk, the city of solidarity, and Lech Wałęsa is from Gdansk, and it's really important in the way that I think that Gdansk is a really special place on the planet and in Poland. It's not so right wing and it's not so political in some way, and this pacifistic movement which crushed communism was born here. And we as a band are really very rare psychedelic creatures, because we've got democratic process. So every song is also made in a democratic process. So it's very frustrating. It's very hard. It's very, we are voting almost everything. It's not easy way. It's very hard way of dealing with a band. There are four people, and most of them are different point of views on each song. So it's almost impossible to be in such band. But I think that, and very often we make mistakes. We think that something is a totally big mistake because of this democratic compromise in the air. And after all, when we look at on the stuff with distance, we see, oh, it was really great. You know what I mean? That I think that we are good in succeeding some unexpected things in the rock and roll world, because we don't have a normal rock and roll structure, and there are a lot of great rock and roll bands, very professional and with a clear vision, and we are like a glitch in the rock and roll system, and I think it works on our side. It's like a democratic glitch in the rock and roll system.
It's a great description, and I think probably a good place for us to end today. The time went really fast, and Grzegorz, I'm so grateful to you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you have a big tour plans coming up, including a performance in Toronto. Is that still on the itinerary tentatively?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. We are working on it. Yeah, the COVID, unfortunately, is still a factor, which is a very serious factor. But yeah, I hope we'll meet in Toronto soon.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for all of your insights, sharing your time, sharing your poetry, for your readings, and for allowing me to read one of them. We're so grateful and appreciative.
I'm so grateful for this invitation, and it was great to be here. And I think if this conversation had a sense, and it's because of you and great atmosphere. So thank you, dear Daniel. Thank you, dear Amanda, and thank you, dear students. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, if you're one of my students, please stay on the call. I'm going to end the live stream now, and we'll do a little debriefing before we break today. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Grzegorz. Take care.